What's up, YouTube? We are back. This is going to be a tier 10 bots tier list for 4-player co-op. This will be including all the new adjustments to attachments and my preference on how things have changed. Largely, I feel like the bot front hasn't changed too much. You're definitely going to start to see the fire weapons to be a lot higher. Definitely the extended mags on ARs don't seem to have impacted the bot front as much as the other fronts where they're more like hordes of enemies. Typically you only really need the larger mags for like berserkers and stuff like that. You don't always need the larger magazines for like devastators, but regardless, we're going to get into it in just a second. Do remember that these tier lists are obviously my opinion and my preference and just my understanding of how people are using weapons. I try to form these in public lobbies. I see how people are using weapons, what they're using, what they're not using, what I'm finding effective, what actually is effective in the numbers, what actually is effective in the gameplay. So just keep in mind that maybe I put your favorite weapon higher or lower than maybe you feel is where it should be. Just remember, due to playstyle, accuracy, input methods like mouse and keyboard versus controller will have a large impact on things. And, you know, it may be +1 or -1 for wherever I put something. But do let me know in the comments down below if you think I missed something, or just come on by the stream. We'll have a conversation about it. We tend to have them quite a bit. So, yeah. Obviously, we are live while doing this, so come on by the stream on Twitch or on YouTube, and let's get into it. First, just like the last tier list, we're going to put Eruptor all the way at the top. I don't think much has to be said. This gun is insane. It's shocking. Shotgunning Devastators, one-shotting them very consistently. So many enemies get one shot very consistently, and occasionally you might need to take two for like a gunship or like the back of a Hulk or, you know, something along those lines. I typically run with iron sights and an angled foregrip for the maximum amount of ergo, and I don't even need peak physique anymore. It's just insane how good this weapon is. You will kill an entire like platoon of Devastators in like maybe 2 to 3 shots, depending on how the shrapnel lands and stuff like that. It's just so powerful and useful. The utility is also extremely high with dealing with fabricators. It can kill a Hulk if you shoot him in the eye. Remember, it got Pen 4 not too long ago as well. This thing is like S+. It is by far the highest on the tier list. And I try not to compare other weapons to it necessarily because it's like an outlier. It's just so much more powerful than everything else in the game. So keep that in mind, right, when we go into this tier list. Because a lot of things you're going to be like, wait, this weapon is only 1 tier lower, but it's like, you can't even do this. I get that. But it's like Eruptor is like on a plane by itself at the moment. It's in a different form than everything else. It's a support weapon in the primary slot is how I describe it to people. It's kind of like how when it first came out, it was a support weapon in the primary slot. It's kind of like that again, but luckily we have so many good alternatives for weapons that you often don't feel like you need the Eruptor, which is good, which is very good, but it's still in a league of itself. So anyways, getting into it, let's go for the assault rifles now. Normal Liberator, light pen. It's nice to have the magazine. It's like your bog standard AR. It's going to be like somewhere between like B-, B+. This is like your middle of the road AR. You'll probably see it somewhere down here on B+ or like, you know, the upper side of B-. It's just solid. It's nice to have the better attachments so you can turn it into like a pseudo laser beam, or just the fact that you can put like a drum mag on it. Like things of that nature are great. Love to see it, but it's largely not too interesting. Liberator Penetrator continues to keep, you know, being quite good. It's definitely a weapon that benefits from it more because it has less damage per shot. So the extra rounds per magazine allow it to 1 mag things a little more consistently, like gunships, or just like be able to take out the legs of Devastators more consistently, or, you know, take out the back of a tank, you know, without needing to reload if you're only half mag. There's things like that, you know, benefit it. You could also make it even more of a laser beam, so it's even easier to hit the eyes or the legs of Devastators. Very solid weapon. It's not quite S tier because it's lacking that extra punch, you know, that either that stagger or that extra utility, but extremely solid AR, you know, especially from like the starter war bond. Highly recommend it if you have not tried it out, and it definitely shines with the new attachments. Labor concussive, C for concussive, honestly. You don't necessarily need the concussive force as much on the bot front. The lower damage and such doesn't feel necessary, really. We were talking about it with someone in my chat, and they were like, I bring the guard dog when I bring this thing because the guard dog kills things. I just stun it. And it's like, yeah, that's fair. And it's like, it's C tier mostly just because its killing power is quite low, but the utility is high. If you're someone who appreciates more of a team play aspect, you'll probably bump this up to B plus or A. You know, I get that. But from like a actual performance standard, all by itself, you know, not including some kind of loadout with it, it's mostly a C tier. It just doesn't quite have the stopping power, but that's fair because of how much stagger it has, I guess. If there was more enemies that were like running you down consistently, I would say the Liberated Concussive would have more of a point to it. But there's also so many other weapons that have tons of stagger, like Dominator, for instance, that also hit really hard. So it's like, it's hard for me to justify bringing the Liberated Concussive when I would rather bring the Liberated Concussive for maybe bugs, because there's just so many more enemies. And that's where like the individual shot placement of Liberated Concussive shines above the Dominator, right? So different front, different preferences. The standard STA-52, it did not receive any attachments. This is probably going to sit somewhere in like C tier, C plus. I do think it's a little bit better than Liberated Concussive because it has like that standard assault rifle feel, but it doesn't have good sights. It has an okay magazine. It did not receive any attachments in general, so it's still kind of unwieldy at times compared to what you can do with other assault rifles, that it feels like it's not that good. Probably need some attachments, or just maybe shrinking the difference between light and medium pen a little bit more for it to feel a little bit better. But it's just, it's more of like a novelty weapon just because it's a part of that like crossover. But, you know, it's not like a terrible weapon or anything along those lines. Next, we got the Liberator Carbine. This one will be a little bit higher than the Liberator, just because due to the sheer DPS. And now that the normal Liberator, the Liberator Carbine can get, you know, the drum mag, and you can make it into a laser beam, I definitely do start to enjoy the Liberator Carbine quite a bit more than Liberator. It's definitely flipped. Whereas before, I preferred just the bog standard Liberator over the Liberator Carbine. Now that I can outfit the Liberator Carbine to reduce the recoil with, you know, a compensator and a vertical foregrip and the massive magazine, like, it definitely feels a lot better. Now, it won't break into A tier because I typically want to say like the really, really strong performing light pen weapons or the medium pen weapons will be closer to A and S, just due to utility, ease of use, and so on and so forth. That doesn't mean the Liberator Carbine is bad, but I do think like a weapon like the Tenderizer does tend to just perform better with like a lower fire rate. So it's a little bit more ammo efficient, and you can get a similar fire rate because you can actually boost the recoil and boost the fire rate, which doesn't affect the recoil too much because you can just put on a foregrip if you want to. It would be nice if this Tenderizer did get like an extended mag, you know, going up to like 50 rounds or something like that. But, you know, maybe we'll get it in the future. Who knows? Yeah, I do prefer using the Tenderizer overall, though. I just find that the overall accuracy of the Tenderizer just seems to be a bit better. And then the Liberators tend to be better for like, or Liberator Carbine used to be better for like a Berserker, just for like raw damage right in your face. But yeah, if I'm dealing with like a wide variety of enemies, Tenderizer tends to be a little bit better because it's more accurate. Adjudicator, very strong alternative to Liberator Penetrator. It's kind of like a mixed bag on which one you would probably prefer as a player. Some people like the heavier hitting. Some people prefer the laser beam nature of the Liberator Penetrator. So you're going to go back and forth. Adjudicator doesn't have as big of a magazine, but it hits harder, has more durable damage. You know, the Liberator Penetrator has a larger magazine, more of a laser beam, but does less damage. You'll have to decide for yourself, but I will put them basically next to each other because I think that's where they fit. The amendment, first hot take of the tier list. I genuinely think a lot of people are way too harsh on this weapon because of how the Warbond was received. And when the Warbond came out, they were too busy playing other weapons that had more interesting attachments and so on and so forth. and they didn't really give the amendment as much of a try as it should have been given. I genuinely think the amendment is like an A minus, even on bots. This gun has the same durable damage as the Liberator counter sniper. Although it's not medium pen, if you fire at the legs of Devastators, you can 4-shot them. You can 1-shot them in the eye, obviously, but 4-shotting a Devastator in the leg when you have that big of a magazine is actually quite nice. And you have a really fast fire rate if you put it in semi-auto and just spam fire. It's actually almost as fast as you can click. It actually might be as fast as you can click. It's ridiculously fast firing. So the damage per second and the burst fire that is extremely high. Although it doesn't have any real knockback or anything like that, just if you are a precision shooter that wants some raw DPS if something gets in your face, you can drop a target so fast with this thing. And I largely think people are kind of underselling on that one. The bayonet, unironically, is actually also pretty good for killing tanks. I know that sounds really weird, but melee damage, or how melee works on your primary weapons, is the bayonet kind of goes through the armor and does damage to it. So you can melee kill a tank if you get behind it. Although you normally need light pen to kill that tank, you could melee it to death. There is some utility in that. I don't really recommend meleeing anything else with the bayonet, but a tank is possible, especially now that they don't turn as much. So you can get behind it and kind of deal with it that way. It's possible. Constitution, I'm probably going to put it top of C tier. It kind of gets there and doesn't go into D tier just because it's medium pen and it's got the utility of the bayonet, which I just covered. The medium pen is useful and it's fairly good. Slow reload, slow fire rate, not too much damage, not too much durable damage, but I can at least value that it's a medium pen weapon and it doesn't have that bad of stats. Especially if you have pretty good aim, you can one-tap Devastators pretty reliably. So it has that. All right, going into our next A+ is Deadeye. I freaking love the Deadeye. Its only downfalls really tend to be how much ammo it can hold and how fast it reloads. It does kind of feel like you need the siege-ready armor at times just because you want that extra reload speed. Also, I've been hearing reports, I haven't leveled up the Deadeye fully. If you get the 10x scope on it, they've kind of screwed up the sight, so it kind of looks like this. You're holding the scope so far from your face. You are getting the zoom of the 10x, but the scope looks bad because the FOV is modifying the scope sight. I've definitely already had conversations with the devs about I would love a setting similar to Call of Duty. Before you drown me out because it's oh my god, you mentioned Call of Duty. There's a really good setting in the more modern games where you can have FOV affects first person, aim down sight, or doesn't affect it. And you can decide if you want that field of view while you're aim down sight, or you don't, and you want more of a narrowed, focused, zoomed in perspective, right? Because the higher the FOV, the more zoomed out it'll look. But if you have a lower FOV, you'll be more zoomed in. So I would love that. Or at least a toggle to change an FOV slider for first person. Because in the most part, I would turn down my FOV quite a bit when I go first person because I'm trying to be more precise when I go first person versus third person where I'm trying to just more run and gun. But anyways, Deadeye, tons of stagger, very strong on the bot front. Highly recommend giving it a try. I'd probably put the 4X or keep the 4X on it, and it performs really well. Highly recommend. Regular diligence is somewhere in B+ to A-. I do, for the most part, think it is on par with the amendment, but I do want to put it a little bit lower just because I don't enjoy it as much because it doesn't have as much durable damage, which is very useful for taking out Devastators when you can't get that eye shot. If you're just comparing the amendment to the regular diligence as far as shooting eyes, yeah, I'd probably give the regular diligence the upper hand. But when it comes to overall dealing with berserkers, dealing with devastators and things of that nature, I'd rather have the amendment in my hands just for that sheer DPS and, like I said, durable damage. Very important. Please, devs, put durable damage as a stat in the menu. Please. It'll make it so much easier for people to understand that the amendment is not as bad as people think it is. Right? People just look at the stats and oh, it's just a worse counter sniper in every way. Not exactly. Speaking of that, counter sniper, A+, S- kind of tier. The reason why I don't quite want to put it in S- is the ergonomics is quite poor on it, and it has gotten worse more recently. I've been trying to talk to the devs about it, and trying to get that fixed. Weirdity in terms of the counter sniper though, if you pick up your friend's counter sniper, it'll handle the way it used to feel, or at least we perceive it as. But if you use your counter sniper, it handles worse. Very odd bug with that one. Hopefully they can address it in the future. But until then, I think the counter sniper has come down a little bit. If I was outfitting it, I'm probably going to put the 4X and maybe the angled foregrip just to boost up that ergonomics so it feels more usable. You're sitting around the 35 mark at that point, which is, I think, very usable and doesn't need peak physique. But, if you're using it without those attachments, or like you tend to lean towards like more stable platform, it's going to feel like a boat, kind of like when it first came out. And it's kind of rough to use at times. But, I do think it is still an extremely powerful weapon because it's medium pen, tons of durable. It doesn't require as much accuracy because it's medium pen, right? So you can miss those shots and still do decent damage to a Devastator. So yeah, and it's also easier to kill like a Rocket Strider, for instance, because you could just hit that bottom crotch plate. So the Knight, it's a laser beam now. It's an absolute laser beam, but I don't find myself loving it as much. I will probably always be putting this in like burst fire, but it does feel good. It does feel good. And I'm mostly going to put it like next to Liberated Carbine. It's okay. Like I think I'm going to see people using it with like Ballistic Shield from time to time, burst fire. I do recommend it. And just like burst firing the heads of Devastators and stuff like that. I'd probably prefer using the Liberated Carbine in more situations just because it's like a heavier round with more durable, but I think the Knight would be very useful for like those like running gun, missions where you have an SSD or you're bringing like the personal shield or the energy shield to protect yourself. I could definitely see it being fairly useful on the bot front for those situations. STA-11 SMG, I'm going to put that probably in D tier. It's going to be our first D tier. I was debating with chat if I even needed a D tier, but now that I'm like staring at it, would I rather take a Liberator Concussive or an STA-11? I'll take the Liberator Concussive. The STA-11 just didn't receive any of the great quality of life attachments that the Knight did, and it just feels like a bullet hose that you're just going to run out of ammo super fast, and you're not going to like really get much out of it on the bot front. I can't really recommend it. I'm probably being too rough on it, but at the same time, like, I'd rather take an ST11. I'd rather take a Constitution. I'd rather take a Liberator Concussive. There's a lot of weapons I'd rather take over the ST11. It largely is just, once again, a meme weapon. Like just a crossover, like, free weapon that you got. It's cool, but largely don't love it. Reprimand. Love what they've done with the Reprimand. I'm going to put it a little bit lower than the Lib Pen and the Adjudicator just because the Reprimand loses a lot of damage at range, but they have made it more accurate. It's basically as accurate as any other assault rifle. They've given amazing recoil reduction attachments to it with the vertical foregrip and the compensator. Fantastic. And I put like the 1.5x. You keep it good ergo while getting a little bit of zoom. Feels awesome on the bot front. Highly recommend. Definitely don't want to shoot at targets too far outside of 50 meters though, because the round is very heavy because it's medium pen, but it loses a lot of speed very fast. So it'll be hard to hit targets outside of 50 meters, especially if they're strafing. And it also loses a lot of damage because in Helldivers, the round losing speed equals it losing damage. So definitely not something you want to use at range. If you're trying to use it at range, recommend going for a Diligent Counter Sniper or Adjudicator or Liberate Penetrator. That's why I value them more, is because typically in bots, you're going to be shooting at things in a much larger variety of distances, and the Reprimand won't always be at the optimal range. Defender feels okay. I largely think the Defender and the Pummeler feel like they are being power crept by everything. They did receive the larger magazine to 75, but I largely feel like I would rather use the Knight. It's a little bit smaller magazine, but feels more like a laser beam, and it does better damage per second in those situations where I need damage to drop a target. The Defender just fires too slowly, doesn't hit hard enough, and it's light pen, so it's also gets a little bit of a decrease just because it's light pen. It's harder to use in some situations, loses utility. So yeah. Pummeler, more or less very similar to the Liberator Concussive. I'm going to put it right next to it. It is one-handed, so it will be higher. I'll give it that. But you're probably better off just taking the Defender in most situations. Yeah, I don't think there's much more to say. It's very similar to Defender. It just feels like it's, losing its power versus other weapons that are getting buffed so much due to all these cool attachments, or just so many other weapons getting stagger, or, just valuing other things more, as you will. Regular Punisher, some people might, be like, wait, what? But the regular Punisher is actually not that bad for bots, especially with the choke. This is one where I don't know whether or not I want to put it at the bottom of B- or top of B-, or B-, top of B- or the bottom of B+. With the choke, it's actually fairly good at hailing Devastator eyes. I know that sounds weird, but it actually does. It has a ton of stagger. It's good at, Berserkers, good at tier 1 bots, good at Devastators. You're not going to be dealing with anything that's medium pen required, like a gunship, but it's actually kind of slept on. It's very easy to use as well, because you just kind of aim in their general direction of their eye, and, maybe 1 to 2 shots, and they're dead. It's actually pretty damn user-friendly. And I think a lot of people just tend to like, well, I need a precision weapon, so this is bad. But it's actually not that bad. Put the new full choke on it. I think you'd be kind of impressed. I'm going to put it in B+ for now. We might change it by the end of the tier list, but we'll see. Slugger. I'm going to put it top of A-. The reason why I'm not going to put it any higher is just because same thing as the Reprimand. It loses a lot of damage and range, so you're mostly going to want to use it pretty close quarters, but the fire rate is quite low on it. I would rather use the Deadeye in most situations, because like the Deadeye and the Slugger are very similar family of weapon, very similar damage and so on and so forth, but the Deadeye has more range, whereas the Slugger has a little bit faster fire rate and more ammo and reserves before you have to reload, right? So if you find yourself being a close quarter bot gamer, Slugger is probably the more preferred versus Deadeye, but I feel like most players, and me personally, I tend to play at a medium to long range against most bots, so the Deadeye tends to be more useful in more situations, in my opinion. It's easier to hit those, Devastator shots at 50 to 100 meters than it is with the Slugger. Slugger is better on those like within 50 meter, Devastator brawls and stuff like that. So your mileage may vary depending on what you like. Keep that in mind. The Halt, solid. Just a solid all around. I think it's like a minus, like the bottom of A-. It's a little bit higher than B+ just because EMS rounds are very useful for stunning enemies, and the Flechette is medium, but it's kind of hard to use it at times in closer ranges. It did not get the full choke of the Punisher, so it's kind of hard to use at like those kind of longer like plink distances for a shotgun, but at least it kind of makes up for it with lots of like stun potential, so you can, stun them, get that distance closer, maybe stun an entire pack and just take out their legs, or make an exit, run away. So the utility is extremely high with the Halt for that reason, and it's still medium pen, so there's a lot going for it in that regard as well. So keep it in mind. Huge glow up of the patch is the Cookout. Now, I am so close to putting this in S tier, because the ease of use is incredibly high, because all you have to do is light a Devastator on fire twice and they burn to death, right? And on top of that, the Cookout has so much stagger that when you're shooting at them, and it'll hit their legs and stuff like that. Remember, legs and arms are light pen. It's just the chest that is medium pen. You don't even have to hit the chest. You just light them on fire twice, they die. So you could have like a Devastator swarm in front of you, right? And just spam the Cookout or the Incendiary Breaker into it, and they will slowly die. It's not like the fastest kill in the world, but it's very easy to use because they're probably not shooting back at you, or at least lethally if you're doing it at a pretty long range. And you're just killing so many with such low effort. Like, it's crazy. I highly recommend. The only reason I'm not going to put an S tier is that it kind of struggles to compete with like other S tier weapons that are just so powerful at like more things, especially having medium pen or having the utility of like a crossbow, for instance. So Cookout, extremely good though. I highly recommend if you just want to be kind of lazy and just like do bot missions. It kind of feels like you're playing bugs now. If you guys don't know why it's the case, enemies now take more damage if they have a higher surface area, essentially, like they're bigger. And this really affected the bot front more so than the other fronts. It's crazy. Highly recommend. Regular Breaker, I don't think I'm going to value it as much as the Punisher. It'll probably be bigger, like a B minus, the auto shoddy category isn't as necessary against bots, I find. It is cool to just like spam fire their eyes and stuff like that, but I think the Punisher just does a better job, especially since they don't shoot back at you when you flinch and knock them back so much with the Punisher, which I prefer much more than the Breaker. The Breaker has really good DPS for like Berserkers, but you don't always know when you're going to get a Berserker variant. If you maybe did, I'd prefer it a little more, but largely I think the regular Breaker is good, and it got some great attachments to the full choke, and you know, I use short mags with it from time to time just because like the fast reload is crazy. But yeah, don't sleep on it. It's worth the try, but it's not as strong as like another shotgun like the Halter Punisher in my opinion, or the Cookout. Definitely the Cookout. Spray and pray. Largely, I feel like the poor spray and pray has been doing better recently, but now that the Breaker just gets all the same attachments as the spray and pray, I'd rather just use the regular Breaker in most situations. Yes, you get twice as many shots with the spray and pray, but it takes twice as many shots to kill something majority of the time. So I'd rather have the DPS of the Breaker than the like ammo of the spray and pray, if that makes sense. Yeah, I don't think I really have to say much more than that. Incendiary Breaker, I'm going to put it a little bit lower on the tier list. So it'll be like closer to like a middle A. The reason for that is because the Incendiary Breaker did not get any like stagger, right? It still doesn't have any stagger, so it has more damage per second, but you don't largely need that with the way you're probably going to be using these shotguns for Incendiary. It is nice to have the duck bill, you know, to squash the spread so you can like light more enemies on fire in one go, or the choke, which the Cookout did not get, so you can be a little more accurate at times at lighting specific enemies on fire. But largely you will be missing the stagger from time to time if something gets close to you and starts shooting at you. The stagger is extremely useful, and it's also easier to maintain your ammo on Cookout than it is for Incendiary Breaker. Incendiary Breaker, it's very easy to spam your shots and run out of ammo too fast, even though the Incendiary Breaker may have more shots in total. Exploding Crossbow, one of the only weapons you're going to see in the S tier, just because crazy amounts of ad clear, great utility, pretty easy to use for the most part. It's just very good. If you haven't used it in the last like 4 months or something like that, it's insane how good this thing is, but the Eruptor is still the better weapon. If they're both in S tier, the Crossbow is like S minus, while the Eruptor is S plus plus. The gap is quite large, other than the fact that the Exploding Crossbow can be one-handed, which can be useful depending on your build, but I feel like the Eruptor's general ability to kill is so much higher than the Crossbow in general. Yeah. And although the Crossbow has more ammo in total, the Eruptor needs less shots to do the same job. So same kind of thing with the spray and pray. I'd rather one-shot something than two-shot something. Okay. Plasma Punisher. This is one that I like wish just was better. It's been power crept so much that it's like B minus, C plus at best for the bot front. Doesn't have that much stopping power. It feels like it just kind of knocks enemies around, especially when compared to like the other plasma weapons that we're going to get into later. It just largely just feels like it's not very good. The ammo economy has improved over time, but it needs to do more damage, raw damage, in my opinion. If it doesn't get more damage, I think it'll just continue to go down. It's one of the few weapons that hasn't been touched I think the longest period of time. It's one of the few weapons that just like has been largely being ignored, other than their like Redeemer, for instance. I'm like looking at all the weapons. So it's kind of unfortunate that it's like slowly slipping. Plasma 9, pleasant surprise. This is going to go to like A minus somewhere. I almost want to put an A plus, but it still has the downsides of not that much ammo economy, only 3 shots before reload. But dude, this thing feels so much better without the drag affecting its rounds. It basically almost feels like hit scan. It has like a limited range in a way because of the way they did the drag on it. It just feels really good now. You're like one-tapping Devastators way more consistently. It genuinely just feels a lot better. Highly recommend giving this thing another try, even if it doesn't have attachments. Maybe bring Siege ready for it, just so you have like that faster reload, you get more ammo economy, but it feels a lot better than it once did. This thing has had a huge glow up with this patch. I am, hats off to the improvement on it. Super happy to see. Super happy. Blitzer, I'm going to be a bit harsh on it. I genuinely do not recommend bringing the Blitzer. You definitely could. I'm not stopping you, but I don't think it's that good. Yes, you can stun enemies pretty reliably, but the range factor on it is just so low that you're much better off just bringing another weapon and having to deal with a little bit of ammo economy. And if you don't want to deal with an ammo economy, you have our next 3 weapons that we're going to be talking about. So largely the Blitzer is like mostly like an Illuminate and bug weapon, and we're just going to keep it at that. The Blitzer stun power is kind of useful at times, but the vast majority of situations, you're better off just like taking a halt and just like EMS rounding them. All right, the Scythe. The Scythe's sights are still fucked up, and it's same kind of thing as the Counter Sniper or the Deadeye, where it's like the sights look like this, and they actually move farther away as you increase the zoom. So it's definitely a weapon that I want to put higher, but I don't feel like I should until those get fixed. The new batteries are cool. I definitely think both of them are useful depending on the playstyle. Different players, different playstyle. Some people will want the larger battery just so they can deal with a horde of enemies. Some people kind of like do short bursts of the laser, so the smaller battery is more useful. You'll find your preference. But until the scope gets fixed and I put like that 4X on, I don't think I want to put it in A+ tier. I would put it in A+ tier if it had better sights picture and it didn't have that weird bug going on, because it would feel like a better light pen DMR, right? Like it would be light pen, but at least you're lighting enemies on fire and it's incredibly accurate, right? Because it's a laser. So yeah, very close to A+ tier. It's just they need to make some modifications on that one. The Sickle. This is one that is slowly coming down my tier list. As you can remember, it used to be S, A+. Right now, it's like kind of a tough one for me. Like I almost want to put it in B+ tier, but I can still appreciate that light pen. It's still a limited ammo because it's a laser weapon. It's pretty damn easy to just spray it at Devastator's like front faceplate, and some of the shots will land. But it is slowly coming down a tier list because it is losing out on like damage and attachments. We'll see if this thing gets like the magazine attachments that the Scythe got. Who knows? But I think maybe the Scythe was just given the attachments so it could shine a bit brighter than the Sickle, because the Scythe has largely been ignored for the majority of this game, whereas the Sickle has been a beloved AR for the entire thing. So we'll see. We'll see what happens in the near future. But Sickle's still a solid weapon, limited ammo, light pen, but aim it directly at the front faceplate, and you will get rather good results for the most part. Double-edged Sickle. I'm not going to separate them again, whereas like, the 2 categories of like, if you invest into it versus not. I'm just going to talk about the 2. If you invest in it, the weapon's an S tier. But that's unfair because I'm not investing in any other weapons necessarily for this tier list, right? And what I mean by that is that they actually recently reverted the damage you take when using a double-edged Sickle. If you wear any form of fire resistance armor, the inflammable, not kill zone, inflammable, and you take vitality, this thing doesn't do damage to you until you fully overheat it and light yourself on fire. So this thing is insane if you invest in it. It's really fucking good, like really good. It goes from light, medium to heavy pen, and if you have extra stims, the heavy pen is very good for killing even Hulks, which is crazy. But if you don't invest in this thing, it's like a B-, B+ kind of weapon. Yes, it doesn't do as much damage as it once did to you, which is cool, but you need to invest into it in even like the smallest way to get it to be a little higher. I'm gonna be a little bit kinder to it and put it B+, like at the bottom of B+, because I'm gonna assume that the team you're running with probably is taking vitality regardless. So I'll give it that. So the gun does feel very good even with just vitality, but you definitely need the inflammable perk to like accelerate it way higher. If you have not tried it out since the patch, highly recommend it. It's very good on all the fronts, and you don't actually need to bring stim like supply backpack with it. Just if you're about to overheat, reload, right? And then just use it again. You'll take no damage. So it's essentially like a medium pen sickle at times, but just remember, you need to invest in it, whereas the sickle, you don't need to invest in it. Keep that in mind for the tier list. I understand that I'm talking up a lot, but hopefully that made sense. Scorcher, extremely solid weapon, but ammo economy is suffering on it. Very easy to use, very usable versus like the backs of tanks and so on and so forth. Just extremely useful, but it lacks ammo at the moment, and it feels too necessary to bring ammo, which is why it's not going into S tier. If this thing had like 3 bonus magazines, I could honestly see myself putting it in S tier just for like ease of use and so on and so forth. Doesn't have as much utility, but it'd be at least at the bottom of S tier for that. Extremely good though, highly recommend, but in a lot of situations, I would rather you use the Purifier, which I think is just the better weapon overall for the bot front. This one's a bit of a tough one for me to place because I'm like juggling between the two, as you can see here, because it's extremely good. At many times, it's like a better crossbow because it fires faster, has a larger ammo supply, and so on and so forth. But it doesn't have the utility to deal with the, fabricators, which is a bit unfortunate. But I'm going to put it at the bottom of S just because fabricators, for the most part, are pretty easy to kill nowadays compared to in any other time in the past. You know, strafing runs are everywhere. Everybody has like AT of some kind that they're bringing. I'm going to assume that like it's not a huge priority for you, because it isn't for me anymore, to have a primary that can deal with a fabricator, right? I feel like that is going down because it's so easy to deal with fabricators nowadays. But it is very much at the bottom of S tier, right? Very much the bottom. Okay, Torture. It's an interesting one, but it just lacks range. I will put it higher than the Blitzer, but it's hard to use because it doesn't have much range. If you're dealing with a rush them down kind of like constellation, it's like quite good to deal with like berserkers and light them all on fire and stuff. But just to get close to Devastators, get close to a Hulk and not die to the Hulk, it's pretty rough. It's not a bad weapon. It has a lot of utility of being such high pen and dealing so much damage if enemies walk into the fire, but it's hard to use effectively without just getting yourself killed. So can't really recommend it too much. Dominator feels extremely good at the moment, especially when you remove the laser sight and remove the sight and put iron sights. This thing does not need peak physique anymore. It's a 35 ergo monster. Love using this thing. It's not as good as like the exploding crossbow, same kind of thing as a purifier, but as a weapon at the bottom of S tier, you know, it feels really good. I think the purifier is largely probably a little bit better, especially if you're fine with a charge weapon, because of just how much raw damage it does AoE. But the Dominator feels really good for like a little bit closer range situation, especially like that 50 meters or so. Just the raw damage and the stagger that it has, the DPS, it feels very strong now. It really does. I highly recommend giving it a try. It feels very strong. I just finished getting it to 25 today. It felt great. Not needing to bring peak physique. It was awesome. Okay, Peacemaker, going into our secondary weapons. Peacemaker is like largely like a C tier. It's okay. Like it's not bad. And if you're like pretty good at like tapping the Devastator eyes, it's okay. I wouldn't like hate it if someone made me use it in like a loadout redeem or something like that on my stream. But I think in a lot of situations, it's like, would I rather just have the Redeemer on single shot and just have more ammo in general? Maybe. And then have the potential of like swapping to the full auto and just mag dumping a Berserker that gets too close. Yeah, like the Peacemaker has like at least the benefit of like being silent. It's essentially like one of the most silent weapons in the game, which is interesting, even though it doesn't have a silencer. Silencers win, Arrowhead. I know a lot of people are asking for them. But yeah, the Redeemer is another one of those weapons that it feels like it's just dropping over time just because we got so many of these cool weapons and alternative to use. So, yeah. Verdict, solid A- tier. You know, a reliable medium pen. A little bit high on the recoil. Sidearm. We'll see if we ever get like secondary attachments to get like, you know, less recoil or like a bigger magazine, but it feels really good. It's a very strong weapon, and I would highly recommend. Senator is going to go right up into S tier like the other weapons, although it's not as good against like dealing with like the smaller tier enemies as much. The fact that it can kill a Hulk is just always going to be an insanely high utility sidearm for that. Like if you didn't bring anything else in your loadout that can deal with a Hulk, like you didn't bring an Eruptor, you didn't bring AMR, you don't really have any red stratagems, you can just bring the Senator, and this thing is extremely good at killing Hulks. You got to be accurate, and the third-person sights suck because the triangle just gets in your way, but if you can deal with that, it's extremely powerful, and it does a fairly good job at dealing with Devastators and other things, so it's a very high utility weapon, but it also just does very well in general in the mission. So I highly recommend giving it a try. Stun Lance is going to be another one. Like, I'm going to put it a little bit higher than the rest of the melee weapons, but then I'm immediately going to put the rest of the melee weapons in D tier. I don't think I need to explain myself too much. It's just really hard to use melee weapons and make them like super useful. The Stun Lance goes a little higher because it has more reach and it can stun enemies. So as long as you can get the first hit off and stun them, they might not kill you. But you're going to be hit trading so often and they do so much damage. It's hard for me to recommend a melee weapon on such a ranged heavy front. It just doesn't make much sense. Stim Pistol, solid B+. It's one of the fronts where I feel like it is probably one of the better ones to bring. Hell, even A- just because there's so much plinking happening. What I mean by that is like random Devastator shots just, doing a little bit of damage to you over time. And you might lose 25% of your health, but you're like, I don't want to use a stim. Having one teammate with a stim pistol just to like top you up, extremely useful, and will make your entire team's stims go farther. It would always be nice if you could somehow like stim yourself, but it's very useful for team play. And if you're pretty accurate and you don't feel like you're using your secondary for anything else, it's very good. Bushwhacker, not particularly the most useful weapon on the bot front, but it does have its uses for dealing with like berserkers that get too close, or like flinching a Devastator that's like fairly medium range, even. Really high damage, but it's light pen. It's got lots of staggers, so that's why I'm going to put it there. It doesn't go lower just because it can be useful. It can be. Talon, solid A-. I'm probably going to put it right next to the Verdict. You can definitely spam the Verdict more, but you have to deal with ammo. Whereas the Talon, you got to tap fire slower, because if you mag dump it, you're only going to get I think it's like 5 shots before it overheats, and then you don't have that many backup mags. So you got to be someone that's more like about pacing your shots, taking your time so you can hit those. All right. Yeah. But they are very much like interchangeable in that regard. Crisper, pretty solid. I think largely with the fire update, it's actually like an okay sidearm for like berserkers getting close to you, Devastators getting close to you, lighting the ground on fire below you. It's like fairly good for like, I genuinely think like people haven't really experimented too much with the Crisper. I know some people like came up my chat and like, thank you for mentioning the Crisper on the Illuminate tier list. I wasn't really using it. It's really good for Illuminate. It's not as powerful on the bot front because the enemies in general aren't like rushing you down as much. So the like laying the fire out behind you as you run away isn't as important, but it's still fairly useful. I would recommend. Grenade Pistol still has extremely high util. I don't think I use it nearly as much because it's so easy to kill fabricators in general, but it's still extremely good for that. And it has pretty good ad clear potential. Like if a bot shot happens in front of you, all the bots come down. 2 grenade pistol shots can take out like a horde of Devastators just because, the explosive damage is fairly high on it. Yeah, I'd recommend giving it a try if you haven't used it in a while. Dagger is a fun weapon to use. It's light pen, very accurate, very similar to the Scythe, but I feel like you'd rather just use a Scythe if you wanted this archetype of weapon. But it is fun to use from time to time. Lighting enemies on fire is fairly good for like berserkers and things of that nature, but you're probably not going to be lighting a Devastator on fire multiple times to kill it. You're probably just going to be going for the eye. And it's fairly good for that if you have an accurate hand. An unfortunate big loser of the bot front, but at the same time, I genuinely like the fact that they did it, is the Ultimatum. The Ultimatum can no longer destroy the sensor towers or jammers. And many people are probably booing in the back and it's like, this sucks. But I genuinely was finding bots got boring. Like, some of the most interesting side objectives that they have are the sensor tower and the jammer. But this was like, it was just making it boring because you would just walk up to them, delete it, walk off. And it's like, that's cool. And it was fun for like 2 weeks. But then like, it got to the point where like bots started feeling like you're just walking around with the ultimatum, one-shotting all these objectives, and you just like move on to the next. And I genuinely like what they did to the ultimatum. They made it way more AoE focused, whereas before you had to hit the target directly on for it to do any damage. If it like missed and hit the ground next to it, it largely wouldn't do anything. It had very low explosive damage. So now they basically swapped it. It does way more damage when it lands next to a target. And obviously it still does that damage if you hit the target, right? You know, it's not as good versus factory starters, but it's no slouch. Like, it still does decent damage. And it's still like one-shotting hulks, and it's still destroying devastator swarms. It's better at it now because it has more range because of it. And it's still fairly useful for like taking out fabricators and stuff like that at like weird ranges. But it did lose a lot of it. So going from like S tier to probably somewhere like, you know, A plus, you know, maybe a little bit lower, you know, it's at the bottom end of A plus. It's still a great option. And you do spawn with 2 ammo, by the way, if you have Hellpot optimization on. So it got its ammo increased and it got its explosive radius increased. So it did lose some potential, but like, I think the bot missions in general are thankful for it. And also Hell backpack enjoyers are loving this because your Hell bomb backpack is like genuinely useful again, like more so than it was before, because that's what you bring to take out stratagem jammers or take out you know, sensor towers with. It's very good. So yeah, we'll keep it with that. Loyalist, I'm gonna put it like somewhere like it's above verdict. It, like we've said with other tier lists, it's definitely a secondary weapon that you have to be very deliberate with when you're using it, because its only real benefit is from the charge, because it's basically like a baby purifier. But a lot of times when I use a sidearm, it's more of a panic situation. Not really like I'm just like gonna put away my primary weapon and use this. But it does sometimes feel like a secondary weapon in your a primary weapon in your secondary slot. So it is a fairly good weapon, and it does perform quite well on bots. It does do less damage, but utilize the charge weapon component of it, and it's actually quite good. Don't tap fire it. It's not good at all if you're doing that. Dynamite largely is like a B- for me. I probably would just almost rather use the high explosive in like the vast majority of situations. The high explosive has better pen. It has more upfront damage. The dynamite is mostly there for like a devastator swarm or like a bunch of berserkers, but I would like my nade to do at least some amount of like extra damage to medium pen, and on top of that dealing with like hulks and stuff like that a little more often, or a tank, right, doing more damage to a tank if you throw it behind it. So I would rather like the high explosive in more situations. The dynamite, if it had like a bonus one or even more range, maybe I'd value it a little bit more, but I largely find myself not using it that much. Frag grenade is essentially just an alternative to the dynamite. If you want more frags, you go with the frag grenades. If you want more damage, you go with the dynamite. If you want shrapnel, you go with frag grenades. It's kind of like you're just like trading off back and forth, but I largely think the high explosive is just better and more consistent at one-shotting more targets. Incendiary grenades are largely a lot better than they used to be. You can pretty much guarantee that if you like throw it at an enemy and he's standing in the fire, he will die. That's Devastator. And I do like it for like horde clearing, probably more so than the dynamite and frag grenades in most situations. It doesn't have that instant kill potential, but you could kill a lot of enemies, or at least damage a ton of enemies because they walk through the fire. I still am hoping that incendiary grenades just last longer, like the fire just lasts longer on the ground. I find largely that I would almost always bring the gas grenade over it, because the gas grenade just lasts longer, has a larger duration, like the effect itself, because it's CC as well, and it also like it actually has some verticality, and like Like you would think like it wouldn't be able to destroy a fabricator. It can. So the gas grenade is just largely just a better incendiary grenade in the vast majority of situations. Impact, another like B plus. I kind of wish it had like another one at this point. High explosive does more damage, but impact is more instantaneous. So if you need enemies just kind of die in front of you, impact has that immediacy that you might be lacking from other grenades. It is heavy pen, so you can deal with some enemies that way. But you'll probably have to use quite a few. It would be kind of nice if the impact got more of them in general, probably. Largely been seeing that as like a huge discourse of like, there's a lot of nades that feel like they're kind of like falling down the tier list, especially when we're going to talk about the pyrotechnic a little bit later. And then the impact is kind of like never changed. It was amazing when the game came out, but there's just been so much power creep that it doesn't feel nearly as powerful as it once did. Stun grenade is going to be like the bottom of A tier. It's probably the faction that it benefits the most from, keeping Hulks from moving too much so you can hit their eye fairly easily, freezing Devastators in spot, making their eyes easy to hit, largely. But outside of like dealing with Hulks, it's usually just a grenade that gets kind of lost in the noise of like just better grenades that can deal with like enemies. But I still think it's like quite good for those people that are having trouble hitting Hulk guys, and the gas grenade is not helping you hit those Hulk guys, because when they're affected by gas, they're like rotating around and moving, and it doesn't work very well. Secret grenade is largely going to be a C tier. I don't think it's that good. It doesn't quite do enough damage. It lies to you when it says you got 4 kills. You probably only got 1 to 2 at most. There's some cool tech that you can do with like throwing it behind a Hulk and then targeting the Hulk, and then like it might come back, but you got to throw multiple to kill a Hulk from behind like that. So it's largely just, I think it's like lying to you most situations. I think if it had more of them or just did more damage, it would be nice. But until then, it's probably just a C tier. It's not particularly amazing. Smoke grenades, going to be down in D tier. More smoke. That's all I'm going to keep saying is more smoke. If we had like twice as many smoke grenades and like they were like larger plumes of smoke, I think smoke grenades would be more useful. It's just, they're a preventive measure to avoid combat. If an enemy knows where you are already and you throw down smoke, they're just going to try and walk through the smoke or keep shooting through the smoke. And then once they get some of the smoke, they're just going to keep shooting at you. Like, it can reduce their accuracy or stop them from shooting at times, but you don't largely have enough smoke for that to be the case. It doesn't cover enough surface area to help you. Like, you'll throw it at your feet, but they're still going to be shooting at you. They're still going to be trying to deal with you, or they're just going to run at you and then kill you at that point. More smoke. More smoke would be nice. I think it would help it a ton. Thermites, still S tier. Amazing for tanks. Great for factory striders. Great for fabricators if you don't want to throw it inside the vents. It's just really good in general. Not great for ad clear, but it's like the opposite of gas grenade. Gas grenade is great for the small tier enemies. Thermite is greater for the large tier enemies. So very good though. Highly recommend using Thermite, but you already know that. Yeah. If you haven't been back to the game in a long time, give it a try. Throwing knives, bottom of D tier. I think it's even worse than smoke grenades. They're memes. They're meme weapons. They need to do like maybe twice as much damage and maybe even have heavy pen for me to even consider wanting to bring them. Maybe if they did twice as much damage, I would maybe see like some ways to like throw them at the legs of Devastators and see it get one shot, but like, is that realistic? I don't know. So I doubt the devs would ever do it, but yeah, not that good. Pyrotechnic grenade. This one is weird as hell because the sparklers that come out of the actual nade do pen 5 and they do a good amount of damage. It actually is like this pseudo like gas incendiary, or not gas, but it's like incendiary thermite grenade kind of territory, and it has 6 of them. I'm gonna put it in S tier because it deals with hordes pretty well, because it actually does respectable damage when it's spinning at regular enemies. It lights the ground on fire, lights enemies on fire, which fire is in a lot better spot. But then on top of that, nice little good cherry on top, it deals with factory striders in only 2 if you can get the nades placed by a foot and then they don't walk away from it or like spin away from it. So it may take longer or more if that happens, but damn, is this thing good if you see a Factory Strider land in front of you and you throw 2 at a foot, the Factory Strider will die in the next 5 seconds. That's crazy. That's actually insane. Like, it's not as good against, you know, Hulks or Devastators or Berserkers, but it's acceptable, and you get 6 of them. But it's so good against Factory Striders that it's like undeniable that it's S tier, because it's like you can just use this grenade to replace your like rocket launcher, right? Like you could bring a supply backpack with pyrotechnic grenades and just spam them. Also, you get 3 back, 3 out of 6 when you resupply. I want more grenades to have that. That'd be wonderful. So you could just spam pyrotechnic grenades at a convoy, and like you could solo take on that convoy if you position yourself correctly and throw those grenades well at the feet of the Factory Striders. It's nuts. It's really good. Highly recommend. Don't listen to Reddit when they tell you the war bond's bad. They are just, I don't even know. They're judging a book by its cover and not actually playing the game and giving you their opinion. The pyrotechnic grenade is extremely good in its current context. Highly recommend if you have not tried it. All right, let's quickly go through and see if I want to change anything. I feel like I'm glazing the Dominator a bit too much. I'm probably going to put the Dominator in A+ tier. I don't think it's quite as good as the Purifier or Crossbow's pure like damage and stuff like that. Eruptor is still the king of S tier. No doubt in my mind. I might be being a bit too kind to the Ultimatum and a bit not kind enough to the Loyalist. I'm going to swap those 2 positions. I do think the Loyalist is fairly good, and I am definitely valuing him more over time when you run out of ammo. That being said, we have quite a few weapons that I feel like are well placed, in my opinion. I like them. Definitely, once again, I hope the Scythe gets its sight picture fixed. I think it would easily go to A+ if that was the case. I think I'm pretty happy with most things. Just remember, double-edged sickle. This is a like invested in double-edged sickle. It's a lot better if you invest into it. It's very fucking good. Okay, I think largely we're gonna move like the regular Defender and Liberator a little higher because I think they deserve it. And yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with this tier list. Let me know what you guys think down below. Obviously we did this live, so come on by the stream and just talk to me. You know, I'm live almost every day with some Helldivers and Star stream at least. Yeah, let's talk about it. Let me know down below what you guys think. Come on by the stream, either on Twitch or YouTube. I'm live on YouTube as well. Consider dropping a like on the video if you enjoyed it, a sub on the channel if you want to see more. We will be doing more. We still have a bot stratagem video maybe we'll do, or a bug stratagem video. I don't know if enough has changed for me to want to do them, but maybe we will. But we'll definitely be doing at least the bugs weapons tier list next, at very least. And yeah, thank you so much for watching the video. Have a great morning, evening, afternoon, night, and bye YouTube. Peace.